Well, welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to begin in Chapter 4, which is bringing us to another section. And Chapter 4 is going to be dealing with workforce, jobs, and job analysis. Now, what do we mean by the workforce? Well, as your textbook indicates, we have a workforce profile, and that's made up of the labor force. Now, the labor force, what they see or show you here is the participation rate, and that's the percentage of the population working or seeking work. So that's the labor force. It's all the people right now who are either looking for work or are currently working. Now, when we take a look at the labor force, we have several considerations that we need to make. First of all, age and generational groups. When you're looking at age, you are, especially today, because of the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, you're not looking at a finite grouping of individuals from one age to the next. Today, the workforce can range anywhere from 16 with a work permit to 70 and even older now. So with that vast array of age groupings, you have different types of skills, experiences, shortcomings and strengths and all of that stuff. So when it comes to the labor force, today you have to take a look at the age groups that are participating in this market and how they are being really utilized in industry today. Now also you have skill gaps, and we're going to talk about that here in just a minute, a little bit further in depth. And then improving readiness to work. This is what we want to do, is to improve the readiness of work, for them to be prepared, the workforce to be able to be prepared to go to work. And you see all types of government programs now that are geared towards that end to help prepare people to enter into society or to re-enter into society as productive working citizens. And then skill shortages. Now, this plays off of skill gaps. So let's talk about this. Skill gaps. What is a skill gap? Well, as the name implies, a skill gap is anything that is lacking in the workforce today, in industry. For instance, back in the 70s and 80s, and maybe even the 90s, high schools used to offer what's called VOTECs. And VOTECs were the programs that schools offered to high school kids who were not going to college, but they wanted to go to work and have a skill. So VOTECs were ways of being able to prepare students to go into the workforce without having to go and get a 4-year degree and what have you. And vocational occupations today, such as heating and air conditioning, even mechanics today, and fields like that, they originated with VOTECs, a lot of them, and they were enhanced by going to maybe technical schools, or you could go into the workforce and gain experience that way. Well, more people today are leaving those vocational programs for college. Many are going into the 4-year degree programs, the master's degrees, and so forth. So what we've seen today is a shift in emphasis from needing degreed people to where today many of our opportunities, occupational opportunities, are decreasing because of in the professional world, because we have so many degreed people. But yet what's happened is that we've seen an increase in the demand for skills. So that's going to be, I believe, the wave of the future. Because of the skill gaps, we have today a skill shortage in many areas. In fact, some very lucrative fields today are in these vocational areas. One of the members of my church is a heating and air conditioning professional, and he stays busy. In fact, he was telling me the owner of the company where he works just went and got his certification in heating and air conditioning. He went and got a few classes to help him run a business, and within 4 or 5 years, he was a multimillionaire. This is how in demand many of these vocational programs are. But today, we have to be concerned with what's needed, not only in our country, but also specifically in our church. And this applies to church as well. As a pastor, I have people who lack skills. I have openings in my church from time to time because I've lost ministers and staff people who have moved on. But here we're talking specifically about abilities, knowledge, and things that really don't come from college, but they are necessary for specific occupations that don't require college. And you need to be aware of this in your organization as well, not just church, but in your organization. What skills do you have right now that are in jeopardy? Because not too many people are obtaining these skills, and you've got to plan for the future. These individuals are not going to stay in your organization forever. Eventually, they're going to leave, they'll transfer, they'll quit, they'll die, they'll retire. And how are you going to, as the HR professional, be able to recoup or to be able to replenish your organization with those skills that are going to be absent when these individuals leave? So these are some considerations and elements that are pertinent when you're looking at the labor force and the labor force participation rate. Now, in the next few slides, these are just a few diagrams, some demographic makeups of the workforce right now. Let's talk about education, at least a high school diploma. Well, in 2000, we had 84% of the workforce who had at least a high school education. Today, that's gone up by about 3%, and that's not bad, but you see an increase in education here. Bachelor's degree went up 4%, from 26 to 30% from 2000 to 2010. Now, that may not seem like a big increase, but when you're taking a look at the whole makeup of the workforce, those numbers can be pretty substantial. Here you see another demographic. You're taking a look at race and ethnicity in regards to a bachelor's degree for people who are 25 and older. And you see here the Asian community, by and large, are the most advanced they consume the most percentages when it comes to an advanced degree. And then you have the non-Hispanic whites, the black population, 20%, and then the Hispanic is 14%. So this will just tell you how the demographic of race and ethnicity pans out over the course of since 2010 with people 25 years and older when it comes to advanced degrees like bachelor's degrees. Now here we just see a pie chart that kind of gives you an idea of all of the types of education that people have accumulated and the percentage of those who have obtained it. And you see here a high school diploma. It used to be you could go to work without any education at all. You just went in, worked with your hands, and so forth. But today, that's really not the case. You have to have an education if you're going to be able to survive. And even today, my argument has been, even with a bachelor's degree, and look at this number, 15% today have a bachelor's degree. So, but it's very closely trailed by advanced degrees. There's only a 4% difference. And I would argue that since 2010, that number or that gap has decreased with the number of people getting their master's degrees now. And that comes just as a result of the ease of education today. So a bachelor's degree in the future may be, just regarded as an associate's degree, and an associate's degree like a high school diploma. So you see, as more people are educated, the more educated you're going to have to be able to compete. But as it is right now, we see just a breakup of different education profiles. And one of the things that this should tell us is that our workforce is becoming more educated. And with that, we're going to, or we should expect, better productivity, better quality out of the products and services that we offer. And as a result of their commitment to education, we're going to have to be able to reward them more effectively and so forth. So you see how one thing can tie into another and to another and to another. So this is just an idea of, from an education standpoint, what we're looking at when it comes to the workforce. Now, the nature of work and jobs. Let's look at some basic definitions here. What is work? Well, simply, work is the effort directed toward accomplishing results. Any and everything can be construed as work. For instance, you may be working right now, or you may be on a break from your job, and your work may be as a supervisor, or you may be a clerk at a retail store. That would be actual work. You may be working on your degree, and that's what you're doing also. So anything that is directed toward accomplishing goals or accomplishing results is considered to be work. Now, from that work, we need to be able to specify a little bit more, especially if we're going to help organizations create jobs and job designs and job descriptions. So from work, we need to be able to define job. And what is a job? Well, it's the grouping of tasks. We're not doing just a generic work effort right now. We need to identify what that work entails specifically for each task or duty and responsibility that comes along with the total work. Now, for instance, let's say that you are a mechanic. So a mechanic, I'll just abbreviate it there, a mechanic has to be able to change oil. That would be one of the tasks or duties. They may have to repair equipment such as engines or tires or whatever. They have to have all types of information and knowledge and skills and abilities, and that would go into their total work. Your job is to help define all of that. But right now, it's enough to know that job is the grouping of tasks, duties, and responsibility that constitutes the total work assignment for an employee. Now, from all of this, we know we've got work that's directed towards accomplishing results, and in this case, if it's a mechanic, that accomplishment will come when that automobile is fixed. In order for that automobile to be fixed, you have to know the job that automobile is going to require. So you're going to take the tasks, duties, and responsibility that will accomplish the goal of repairing that automobile, which will be the total work, and you're going to assign that to an employee. But how do you identify the processes that go into repairing that automobile to do that job? Well, in order to discover that, you need to do what we call a workforce analysis. And this is how we study work. And we study three different elements: inputs, activities, and outputs that move through an organization. And when you're taking a look at organizational behavior, organizational structure, organizational design, change, whatever, everything in an organization is comprised of these three elements: inputs, activities, and outputs. Makes no difference what you make or what you provide. You have to have inputs which come from the environment. You have to transform that input into something that is tangible, or whether if it's a service, you have to transform it into something that is viable. And that's what we call activities. And then the outputs, that's the finished product. So everything in business is comprised of inputs, activities, and outputs. Now you see here in figure 4.4 just a pictorial. Again, it's just a diagram of what we mean by inputs, and that's the material. It could be information and data if you're in the service industry. You have equipment. You have the people, and these three elements combined or individually provide the work, and that's which is required to produce the output. And then you have the outputs. So you have all of the inputs here that's going into the transformation of the product or raw material that you're going to be working with. That goes here, and then the outputs will go out into the environment. So what you have, let me spell it right. You have the environment, which provides raw material. You have the transformation of that raw material, and then you have the output of that finished transformed material back out into the environment, which, when you take some of my other management classes, goes back into the environment, which also feeds the inputs again of an organization. So that's the workflow. It's kind of a complex way that I've described it, but essentially we take in from the environment, we transform that material from the environment, and we put it back out into the environment. Now, job design and redesign. Job design, as you see, is organizing the tasks, duties, and responsibilities and other elements into a productive unit of work. Let's say we have, and I'm going to try to put it here on the slide, let's say we have in the manufacturing of an automobile. You have here workers who have a job. You have a job here. You have a job here. You have a job here. And you have a job here. And you have a job here. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just scattered. No one really knows what order anything goes into. But let's say we needed to create an assembly line process to put together a new Ford truck, for instance. Well, I might want to put this job as number 1 because it's the most fundamental, and I might want to make this job number 2, 3, 4, 5, and let's say 6 here. And now we've got some order, so that instead of having just a haphazard collection of jobs and so forth, I've got job number 1, job number 2, job number 3, job number 4, job number 5, and so on and so forth. I've got an order to it. And I've organized now those tasks, duties, responsibilities, and other elements into a productive unit of work. Now, with that, now let's take a look at job design and job redesign. Now, the definition of job design is organizing tasks, duties, and responsibilities and other elements into a productive unit of work. So how do we collect all of those elements that comprise work and the job and all of itself? Once we've done the workflow analysis, we can take that system of inputs and transformations and outputs and then design the job itself. You may have an element here that would be, I don't know. Now let's look at job design and job redesign. What is job design? Well, the definition is organizing tasks, duties, responsibilities, and other elements into a productive unit of work. And here we're bringing about some sense. If you are a company and you are trying to, let's say, produce a product on an assembly line, then you need to have some order and rhyme and reason. People need to understand that in this position here, this needs to be done. In that position there, that needs to be done. Let's say, for instance, you are in a assembly line for automobile, and you're trying to make that automobile the most efficient and effective way you can. So you need to have some order, not only in the specific work but also in the job. So this station would have different tasks and duties and responsibilities, and this one would have the same, and this one the same, and this one the same, as that automobile went down the line towards the completed product. So this is job design. Now also, it's important to know, now that's workflow and all of that, but it's within these components that job design is so important, because here everybody needs to know what they need to do to be able to move to the next level, that product or whatever. Now, what's the result of job design? Well, it influences performance. If you know exactly what you're to do, if you know your responsibilities and duties, then you're going to be more productive, and you're going to be more effective and efficient. It affects job satisfaction. You're not sitting around wondering what my job is and where my place is in this organization or on this assembly line. You're going to know exactly what your contribution does to the overall productivity of that company. And then you have both physical and mental satisfaction, which they include as another benefit of an effective job design. Now, job redesign is changing existing jobs in different ways to improve them. And you've probably heard the term continuous improvement and initiatives like that, which we're constantly trying to evaluate and reevaluate how we do business, whether it's in the service industry or production industry. Companies today are continually reinventing themselves in how they do work. And one of the things that came out of the early 20s, 1920s, was the idea that we can study how work gets done and improve upon that. And that's brought us to where we're at now. We've been slow in the process, but today many researchers will just study how to do things and figure out ways of doing them better. And it's not really something that's an academic exercise. It's a business necessity today, as we have globalization and diversity and technology. We have so many things coming in that would compete with us and pose not only opportunities but challenges. So we're constantly having to look at how we do our job and make sure that we are above and better than the competition. Now, some of the characteristics of jobs and people, quite simply, it's really comprised of job characteristics and people characteristics. Those two things. And as you see here with the arrows, they're all interconnected. Nothing happens in a vacuum. What the job characteristics provide, it's going to affect the people characteristics, and what the people characteristics do will affect the job characteristics and so forth. But I'll let you guys take a look at that as you move forward, and we'll go here to types of employees now. We talked about the workforce demographic as far as education goes and as far as ethnicity and all of that goes, but what types of employees do you have in the workforce? Well, first of all, you have full-time employees, and these are traditionally the 40-hour-a-week, full pay, full benefits. You're responsible for them, and you have to provide benefits and all the things that come with it, but in return, you have a full-time employee. Part-time employees, well, as the name implies, they don't spend 40 hours at work. Their schedules are curtailed, their hours are curtailed to be able to accommodate the needs of the organization. You have independent contractors. These are individuals who are contracted to do a job, and once the job is over with, that's it. You have no more relationship with them unless it's a long-standing contract or a perpetual contract, and these are things that really you outsource a function of the organization to. But really, an independent contractor is someone who comes in and you tell them what you need done and they do it. Now, you don't provide equipment for them. They have their own equipment and resources more often than not, and they do the job based on how they see it needs to be done. You don't get involved as you would with a full-time employee. You direct them and tell them what to do. With an independent contractor, they do the work and they determine how to do it the best way. Temporary workers and contingency workers. I'm lumping those two together because really they're not a full-time, they're not part-time, they're just on call. When you need them, they're there. And you can use temp agencies and professional agencies that will provide you with people all the way from just doing manual labor to being able to provide professional services such as accounting and so forth, record keeping and all of that. But these are people who are there for a temporary amount of time, and they work under a specific period, and they work under conditions that would be like a regular employee, but you don't pay them benefits, and you pay normally the agency the money, and then they pay the employee or the temp the money from what you pay the company. Now, person job fit, when you're taking a look at work design, job design, and so forth, you have to consider the person job fit, and that's matching the characteristics of people with the characteristics of jobs. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you see a classified ad and they're hiring for a receptionist, you may have to type 40 words a minute. You may have to be proficient in Microsoft Word. You may have to be able to operate a switchboard or whatever. These are the characteristics of the job that the person has to match, and you can quite easily determine that, first of all, by the resume, then the interview, and sometimes they may want you to demonstrate that you can perform these tasks or you can do the characteristics of the job. But the person job match is matching the person with what we call the hard skills, those skills that you can quantify by observing or testing and so forth. And it's based on the match between the characteristics of the person and the unchangeable components of the job. And people will differ on what they consider a good or bad job. So that's fairly relative, but what will not change is that person's ability to do the job itself. And that a lot of times, you, as we said earlier, you can measure. Now, there are common approaches to job design. First of all, you have job enlargement. And really, in a nutshell, that just means you're adding more responsibility to the worker. It's broadening the scope of a job by expanding the number of different tasks that are performed. And it's not a bad thing. It's good for the organization because you're adding more and not necessarily paying the individual, which a lot of times the individual doesn't appreciate. But if you have people who are wanting to advance, they need to be able to take on more jobs and tasks and be able to accomplish more. And many people look for that added responsibility and so forth. Job enrichment is creating the autonomy in an individual by allowing them to make decisions, giving them responsibility, and then giving them the ability to plan and organize and control and lead the initiative. And then you have job rotation, and this is quite simply just having them perform different tasks, going around. You're not necessarily adding more work, you're just shifting them from one place to another so that they can become more diverse in their knowledge and skills and their abilities. Now, skill variety. It's work that requires several activities for successful completion. Let's say, for instance, you're a computer manufacturer and you're putting together a desktop computer. There's several activities that have to go into being able to complete the manufacturing of a computer. So there's different skills, and you have to incorporate those different skills. That would be skill variety. Task identity. It's a job includes a whole identifiable unit of work that is carried out from start to finish. So manufacturing may be a task identity, or I can't think of anything right now that comes to mind, but essentially task identity. Now, task identity. Now, task identity. The job includes a whole identifiable unit of work that is carried out from start to finish. Again, on an assembly line. When you get that product in front of you, you do what you need to do to it and then move it on. But from start to finish, you've been able to identify that unit of work as that particular task. And then task significance, and that's the importance of the job and the impact that the job has on other people. As I said before, what you do in an organization is a series of inputs, transformations, and outputs. Rarely will you ever do anything and it not have an impact on other people. And the same goes for other people as it applies to you. So your task is one of many tasks that will really make the difference between whether or not that product is going to be made efficiently and effectively or not. What you do will affect someone, and what they do will affect you eventually. So knowing how much of an impact that your job has on that organization is important. For instance, if I was to get sick and I can't teach for a month, that's going to have a significant impact on this school as far as my course and your degree and the organization's ability to maintain the quality of education. And that goes for any professor. So task significance kind of gives you an idea of just how significant that job is within the overall scheme of the organization. Autonomy is the ability to be free from supervision and so forth and be self-directed so that you can work on your own, to make decisions on your own and bear the responsibility on your own. And then feedback, of course, is just the amount of information that you get on how well or how poorly you performed. And feedback is essential today. We didn't really emphasize it much in the past, but today people need to know how well they're doing, and good managers and effective managers and leaders will have that level of communication with their employees so that there's no guesswork in how well they're doing. You're constantly communicating that to them. And today we're going to finish out by looking at the job characteristics model. And really this is a straightforward approach. You have the things that we talked about: the variety, identity, significance, the level of autonomy, the feedback, and then you see the psychological states that they produce. And then finally you have the desired outcomes, which should be a motivated, performing, satisfied workforce, because you have created jobs, you've identified the tasks, they know how they're doing, and all you have to do at this point is just let them do what they are being paid to do.